This is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is March 29th, 2019, and I'm conducting an interview with Jack Stanfield in Sun City, Arizona. Jack, could you give me your full name, please, and where you were born?
John Richard Stanfield. I was born in Warren, Ohio. I grew up most of my life in Lorain, Ohio.
Okay, thank you. How far is Lorain from Warren?
About 50 miles, 55 miles, 60 miles.
And what war did you participate in?
The Korean conflict.
Okay, thank you. When you said you graduated from Lorain?
Yes, I graduated from Lorain High School in 1949.
Okay, and when you graduated, it was about a year before the Korean War
yes.
Got started up. What did you do after you graduated from high school?
I grew up in a drugstore as a young kid, and I wanted to be a pharmacist, so I went to college at Ohio Northern, pre-pharmacy.
Okay. And did the beginning of the Korean War impact that, have a change of what you were doing?
When the Korean War broke out, I'd had a year in, and I finished the next semester, and I dropped out of college and joined the Navy.
Mm-hmm. How come the Navy?
Well, I had a friend, a druggist, that was in the Navy, and I didn't want to go in the Army, and I was classified 1A, and I didn't want to go in the Army, so I thought the Navy would be ideal for me.
Okay.
I joined the Navy.
Did you do your basic training at Great Lakes?
Yes, I went to Great Lakes for basic training, and after basic training, I was assigned to the Hospital Corps School, and I went to the hospital. Attended the Hospital Corps School for, I think it was 20-week class.
Now, were you able to pick that you were going to the Hospital Corps School, or because you had your pre-pharmacy training, did that help you out?
That helped me out. I mean, most of the people when we came out of Corps School, at that time, they needed corpsmen with the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them got out of Corps School. I think our class had about 60 or 70, and I don't remember exactly. But a lot of those people immediately were transferred to the Marines. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate and was put into the hospital there.
Mm-hmm.
I got assigned to the hospital when I graduated.
Where was the hospital located
Great
at?
Lakes.
At Great Lakes?
Naval
Okay.
Hospital.
Okay.
And I was assigned to an orthopedic ward. I worked in that orthopedic ward for about 7 or 8 weeks, and I was called up one day and asked, or told, not asked, told to go and report to a commander on Main Side at the pharmacy. And so I went over to see the commander, and when I got there, he took me in. He looks at me, and I was a seaman, HM. Looks at me and he says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I was told to report to see you, sir." He says, used a few languages like a good Navy guy, and he says, "This is a chief petty officer's job we're looking for. What are you doing here?" "Oh, well, sit down, we'll talk." We did. Fortunately, he took a liking for me, and I was reported to him for the next 13 months. I worked right for him in the main dispensing pharmacy at Great Lakes.
Wow.
And that helped me a lot, because at that time doctors were being called in to the service. And most all these doctors that came in there were in the building I was in, and I got to know them. I was a dispensing pharmacist, so to speak, and I got to know these people. Well, then one day, I'd been there, I guess, it was a little over a year, and I come in one day, and the commander says, "I got my orders to see Oh my gosh. Next day, I got orders to report to Camp Pendleton, the Marines. And so that's how I ended up in the Marines. I took 10 days leave and reported to Camp Pendleton.
So you, getting back to where you were, when you were in the hospital initially, the hospital after you came out of the schooling, orthopedics, were you fixing arms and legs?
No, I was like an orderly. Like
okay, you were assisting.
Nurse's aide.
You were assisting doctors and medical
nurses,
personnel.
Yes.
Okay, and then did you ever figure out how you ended up getting selected to? When he was looking for a chief petty officer, that you were the one that they bribed. Did you ever figure out how that happened?
I think it was because I was studying pharmacy.
And the guy knew that you might probably be a good fit for the position. Somebody did.
Some personnel man found my records or something. Sent me over there, and he was a good mentor.
Yeah.
His name was Commander Schiff. He was a very good mentor. He and I got along very well.
And then all of a sudden, boom, you're sent in, your orders changed, and you come into Camp Pendleton.
Because I was only, at that time, I was only a HM, which is equivalent to a seaman, only a hospitalman. And while I was there, I became a third-class petty officer. But most people of my pay grade, or that level, if they stayed a year ashore or at a first base, it was something special. I mean, they usually didn't stick around that long. They were shipped out, sent either to sea or to the Marines or someplace else, the corpsmen.
And your name finally came up. Somebody had observed that.
Well, they observed I'd been there too long.
Yeah, they observed that you'd been there too long. And then you were off to Camp Pendleton.
Right.
Who were you assigned to then at Camp Pendleton?
At Camp Pendleton, I went to what they call the field medical school, and it was basically field medicine and teaching you how to be a Marine. Learning how to obstacle course at 5 o'clock in the morning, which I was not used to, getting in shape and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was about a 5-week course.
And then you begin to think, well, maybe going in the Army back when might not have been so bad, huh?
Well, for a little bit that was true, but I sort of took a real liking to the Marines. I mean, I don't know why, but it just, it was a good fit for me at the time.
Yeah, well, that's good. So how long were you at Pendleton?
Well, after the 5-week class, I think I was there about 2 more weeks, and we were loaded on a train and went down to San Diego. And at that time, at the foot of Broadway, there was the main pier, and there was a transport ship sitting there, and we, about, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 of us. I don't know how many there were now. I don't remember exactly. A hell of a lot.
A lot of people.
And we get on the transfer ship going to Korea, and when I get up to the billet to come in, the guy says, "Oh, corpsman." Okay, he gives me, and I got a top bunk. And that was special because the bunks were 4 to 5 high.
Yeah.
And if you were in the bottom bunk, it was a problem.
You had about this much room above you, huh?
So, and took us, we were going to Yokohama and then on to Incheon. And it was rough sea, a typhoon, and our ship was delayed about 5 days for rough sea and diverting, and most everybody was sick. And it was so bad that it was the first time that I knew the Marines didn't have to do calisthenics on deck. And everybody was pretty sick. We finally got to Yokohama, and we were in Yokohama probably 12 hours. And the rumor had been, when we took off from San Diego, that we get to Yokohama, the ship's going to be there for almost 3 days, and then you're going on to Korea. And you will probably get 12-hour Liberty Pass in Yokohama. Well, everybody, when we started to see that we were coming in to land, well, boy, maybe we're going to get Liberty, get off this, and it won't be bad. We all started feeling a little better.
Yeah.
Seas were calmer. So we pull into Yokohama, and first thing was, pretty soon they say, we'll have mail call in so many, what time, 3 hours or something, there's going to be mail call. Okay, so in mail call, they distributed mail, everything. Next thing we know, we're taking off. No one got off the ship. They just put on supplies and took on whatever they needed, and we were on to Yokohama. I mean to Incheon, and we landed at Incheon.
When was that you were landing at Incheon?
I
What year?
landed at Incheon on May 1st, 1953.
Okay. So you landed in Incheon, which by that time was already fairly important place in Korea. Where, what were your duties once you got off board ship?
Well, when we landed at Incheon, my buddy, good corpsman buddy of mine, he and I, we were on deck, and as we came in, there was a ship there with a bunch of big equipment on, heavy equipment, and it said on the top of one of them, Lorain, Ohio. Well, I said to my buddy, Lorain, Ohio, that stuff was made in Lorain, Ohio, where I live. Through Shovel Company, Lorain, Ohio made that. And he's, that was something surprising to see when you're that far away. Okay, so then I was sent to a area where they distribute everybody, and I was immediately sent to the front lines with 8 of the 3rd Marines. I was item company corpsman for the 3rd Marines. 3-7 Marines, yeah. And I was there from about the first week of May until I got wounded.
Where were you at when you said you were up at the front? Do you know where?
We were on a hill called East Berlin, which was close to Pork Chop, which was on the 38th parallel. And we were right on the front lines of this. From May till I got wounded, we were on the front lines all but about 2 weeks.
When you landed at May and you were sent to the front lines, and how long a time was it between then and when you were wounded?
Okay, well, I got wounded on July 10th.
Okay.
53. In the meantime, I'd been with this same company, and we had not seen a lot of real action. I mean, we had skirmishes, but fortunately, we had taken very few casualties up until the night I got wounded. And it was ironic because in those days, a frontline corpsman had mainly 3 months would be the most you'd be on the front lines. Then you would get moved to a field hospital or someplace else. Well, I had on about the 8th of July, I got called up to the commander office, and he said, your replacement's on the way, and as soon as your replacement gets here, you come here, we're going to send you down to the Busan Hospital. You're going to be assigned down there. So as soon as your replacement gets here, we're going to send you down there. Okay. Well, my replacement didn't get there because the next day, all hell broke loose. And they asked for it. We had a group that were pinned down across the valley, across this little valley on another hill. And they'd been pinned down, so they wanted to send a patrol out after it to help them. And I volunteered to go. And there was a patrol of probably 18 of us. And we started out across the little valley, like a rice paddy. It wasn't really a rice paddy, but it was. There was a path you went on. And when we got to the other, just about the other side, we had a brand new lieutenant. He had arrived 2 days before, and he was green as green could be. And I was with him at all the briefings, because Corpsman, I went to almost all the briefings on anything that I was doing. And I knew what we were supposed to be doing and which way we were supposed to be going. And he wanted us to go one way, and the sergeant who was there with him, because it's a point of 4 in front, he's arguing with him. So I got it. I said, we're going the wrong way. You got to go this way. Well, just then they illuminated the area, and we were sitting on this path. And soon as illumination, they started dropping mortars. And about the first mortar came in, killed the lieutenant and the sergeant right beside me. And then a radio man got hit. He was there. He got hit. He got up to run. He got hit in the arm, in the
Shoulder or the arm? Upper arm.
Left arm. He got up to run, and I reached up to grab him. And I reached up to grab him. I got hit, and blew all through this arm, and over I went. And he and I laid there for about 3 hours, and we were the only two alive. The 3 or 4, 5 maybe in front around us were dead, were killed, KIAs, and the ones in the back had somehow been able to get wounded or got away or backed up or whatever, I don't know. But anyway, we laid there, and together we put a tourniquet on his arm, we put a tourniquet on my arm, and we took morphine. And we were laying there, and we couldn't move, because every time there'd be more shells or machine gunning scraping the area, as long as it was illuminated. So it got dark. So we said, let's get the hell out of here. So we got up, he and I helped each other, got up, and I probably went about 20, 30 feet, and I got shot again through the upper arm. I went over into the ground again. He's trying to get me up like this, and I told him, go on, get out of here, get yourself out of here, I'm done. So he's going about, I don't know how long.
Did they reposition your tourniquet or anything before he left?
No. And I got it up here. I was here and here. And I laid there a little bit, and all of a sudden there's 4 Marines. They picked me up, took me back. They saved my ass.
So they came, this was still that night? So
they came and got me back to the main line of resistance. They got me back to the main line of resistance. And who's there to treat me? My replacement. And how I know that is because I met him at a reunion afterwards, and he
told
me the whole story.
Wow.
But they got me back, and they put me on a tank after he did what he had to do and gave me some plasma and put me on a tank to take me back to where they could put me on a helicopter and fly me out to the hospital ship.
Yeah.
And I remember them putting me on the tank, and away we go. And next thing I knew, didn't know where I was. it's white, it's gray. Oh, I must have died. I'm dead. I couldn't believe I went to heaven.
Yeah.
Then I hear this the helicopter cannot find the ship. It's too foggy. I found this all out later from people that knew it, told me the story, that they flew me back to the hospital, Busan, I think. And I remember going in there and going in the operating room. The next thing I knew, sun was shining and they were taking me off of a stretcher on the hospital ship, which was next day later. So those Marines saved my butt.
Yeah, well, did you meet any of the 4 Marines that pulled you out of the field? Did they ever figure out who they were?
No, I've been to reunions, and I've only ever, our outfit used to have reunions all the time. We go, but the reunions were for the time for Korea started to the end of H3.
Yeah.
And there was about 6 guys that were there when I was there, 6 or 8, but only one of them I ever knew. And then the other one that I knew was when it was my replacement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was my story with the Marines, but they really saved me. Then I ended up on the hospital ship.
So were you treated then at Busan? Is that
Yes,
where you?
they had emergency treatment. Yes.
And
then they put me on the hospital ship, and I got on the hospital ship, and they didn't know whether they were going to be able to save my arm or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I was put on the list to be air-vac states. But I was fortunate that instead of sending me to the States, they air-vac'd me to Yokohama Naval Hospital. And I think they did that mainly because of all orthopedic wounds I had. There was a at that time he was a captain.
Mm-hmm.
He was a orthopedic surgeon, and he was at Yokohama. And they sent me there, and I was in Yokohama for 2 operations. And then I was flown stateside. Came home as a stretcher patient all the way. I went from Yokohama to Guam to Hawaii to San Francisco to Great Lakes. And I got back in Great Lakes in September.
So the same hospital you had
Same
trained
hospital, and ironically, I went on the orthopedic ward, and who is there but a nurse that I worked for when I was there.
Wow.
Small world.
Yeah, that's 3 years later or whatever, huh?
Well, no,
years.
it was almost 2.5 years after she was still there.
Yeah.
She was still there, and they treated me like king, because I come home all the way, lost all my sea bags and everything, but they issued me in San Francisco a new Marine Corps sea bag, and now I am in pajamas coming all the way home. And I get back to Great Lakes, and I'm there, and she says, they're going to let everybody have long weekends this weekend, and you're ambulatory. I think we could get the doctor to let you go on a long weekend. You go home, because I lived in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And she says, I said, I don't have any clothes. And she says, well, where's your sea bag? And I said, it's supposed to be here, I guess. I don't know, but it hasn't been tailored or anything. She says, I'm going to check on it. She comes back. She says, I got your sea bag. And she says, two of us, we're going to tailor those pants and everything for you. We're going to get you enough uniform that you can go home. And I was in a body cast up here. I had an upper body cast.
Yeah, with the arm.
And my arm, because they wanted my arm like this, steady, and it just laid in there. I thought I was going to do that. So anyway, they did it. They got a blouse, slid it all, put snaps on it, put me all so I could dress and get like presentable. And down I go and say, I want a weekend pass. Yes, you got your weekend pass. I got on the North Shore train and took it down to Chicago because I used to do that a lot, and got on the North Central train and took it to Cleveland, Ohio. And that was the first time I was home.
So when you were at Great Lakes, none of your family members were able to come up to see you?
No, I got married while I was at Great Lakes when I was working in the pharmacy. And my daughter was born on June 23rd, and I was wounded on July 10th. And I had just received word of her birth.
Where were they living at the time?
They were living with her folks.
In Ohio?
In Ohio. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I was in Great Lakes in the hospital. I was there until April 1 next year. I got surveyed out of the service April 1st, 1954, with a medical discharge of 60%.
Yeah. So when you were wounded, was there a name of the hill or the battle? You said you were by East Berlin Hill initially.
I think it was on East Berlin.
East Berlin where you were wounded, you think that's what it was?
And then when I went back and revisited Korea in 1999, you know, they had that revisiting program. I went back and I was out at Panmunjom, and they took me right over to where the hill was. So
Wow.
I did that in 1999. It was back there. Yeah.
But that brought back some memories. Did you learn a lot while you were back there, as far as different aspects of what was going on?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, everything had changed so when we were there. I mean, it was 80 of us in our group, I remember, in Seoul, and they treated us very well, very, very well. And I can remember everybody says, Seoul didn't look like this when I was here. The only thing we ever recognized was the old train station. Yeah. No.
So do you know how many Marines were killed in that event that night?
I'm not for sure, but I did read the Marine Corps history. They had that battle written up. That night is one of the worst battles at the end of the war. One of the last big pushes, both sides.
Yeah.
I don't know how many were. I think that I don't know how many were killed or how many got away. I mean, one of them was taken prisoner of war, and I did meet him 3 years later, and he was taken prisoner of war, but none of us knew much. I mean, we didn't know. We know we got kicked out of us, but we didn't know much else.
Yeah. So while you were, when you came back from your weekend back home in Ohio, you were in the hospital then for months and months after that?
Yes, I came back. I had 3 more operations at Great Lakes, and they saved my arm. I mean, everything works. It didn't work well at first.
Yeah.
Because it was like this. The arm was laid in a cast like that for almost 3 months before anything else was done. I mean, because of skin grafts and everything they had to do.
Yeah.
It was good. They did a good job.
So then you were in, as you said, was in April of 54?
April 1st, 1954.
When you were medically discharged?
Yes, with 60% disability. And at that time, they said it was temporary disability. And I had to go back once a year for reevaluation. At the end of 5 years, I was called to Bethesda Naval Hospital for a week. And I couldn't figure out what they wanted me for a week for. Because I'd go back each year for evaluation. I would go to Great Lakes, and I'd check in 8 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm okay, you know,
Yeah.
everything was sort of a routine. I got to get to Bethesda Naval Hospital, and I check in, and they say you're going to be here probably 5 days, maybe not quite 5, but 5 days. Okay, so the first day they send me down, and who do I meet? But the admiral who did my first surgery. He was there. And he had written up this, I guess they had written up this whole treatments that they had done, because I had, all these bones were gone except they were splintered. In fact, my hand was like this. They packed that, and they did with bone, I guess, and I had all kinds of treatments, and it worked, that the bones got together and everything works.
Wow, that's impressive. When did your family first learn about your injury? Do you know that?
No.
They known it when you were at Great Lakes. Was that?
Oh, they were notified. They were notified I was wounded, and that was it. And when I got to Yokohama, a Red Cross worker came by and said that they would try and get me a phone call to the States, and they did.
So you were able to talk to your wife at that time and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Another interesting thing is when we flew home, when we landed in California, as I said, we came with stops, and I was held up in Hawaii for 3 days because the first prisoners of war were being released, and they wanted the plane we were on, they wanted it to go back and pick them up, I guess. So we stayed there 3 days, and then another plane, and we landed at Travis Air Force Base, and when we landed, who came on the plane to greet us? Bob Hope.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Because he was there, because the first prisoner of wars were coming in too, and they were there to welcome us. And our plane came in, and they came in, and we all were there together. Bob Hope came on our plane and talked to us, and then he says, every one of you get a 5-minute phone call on me when you get into the hospital. Because in those days, phones were expensive, and it wasn't that easy, you know, to make phone calls. It wasn't like today.
Yeah, a lot different back then. So besides the Purple Heart, what other medals have you received?
That was all I had, the Purple Heart. Yeah.
Nothing concerning merit badge with that particular battle or anything?
No.
So obviously your service has impacted your life a lot because you've been living with that. Could you talk a little bit about how your service, or particularly your injury, how that has impacted your career or impacted in your life going forward after you left the military?
Well, I was planning to go back to pharmacy school. In fact, I was registered to go back to Ohio State when I got out. I got out in April, and I registered for September to go back to Ohio State. And I had a child, married, and the VA was pretty good to people in those days. And I mean, they looked after you pretty good when you got home. I got home, and my arm was stiff. I couldn't do hardly anything, but they were trying to help me get a job. And in fact, you got paid each week until you got a job. So many weeks they compensated you until you got a job. And they sent me to different places for jobs. And the places they sent me, I didn't have a very good attitude for. I didn't want to be a night watchman. I didn't want to be a sweeper salesman. And I'd ask them to just sign that I've been here for a job, and I'd go back and they'd take care of me. Well, then they sent me to the May Company department store. And I went out and applied, and the personnel office, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, we're not hiring. We're full right now. We don't not hiring anybody." "Okay, will you sign this?" Well, I said that, okay, and so I'm walking out. A gentleman comes up, and not known to me, but he was the store manager. He comes up and starts talking to me, and he says, I don't know whether he knew I was there or what, but he started talking to me about, "You were in the Navy and the Marines and all this." "Yeah, we did this." And he says, well, I said, "But you're not hiring." They said they're hiring. "Yes, we're hiring. Come on back." Well, he hired me. And they put me in the basement of the store selling Oshkosh by gosh.
The clothes and stuff, yeah.
And they were going to pay me $50 a week. Oh, that was good. Okay, so I said, "Well, I've got to go to school. I'm leaving in end of August. I'm going to school." "Okay." So it comes the 1st of August, he calls me up. He was another mentor of mine, a very good mentor.
Mm-hmm.
He called me up and he says, "I know you're going to school." He says, "But," he said, if you would want," he said, "I'd put you in charge of the men's department." And he says, "I can pay you then $75 a week." And I think, well, maybe I'll put off going to school till midterm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll take that, because gosh, $25 more a week. I'm okay right now at 50, but I could start putting some money away and doing things. Okay, so it comes November, and calls me up again one day in the office. He says, "I know I've talked you out of going to school once," and he says, "I don't want to talk you out of going back to college." He says, "But if you want to stay here," he said, "I'll put you in charge of the main floor, and we're going to pay you $100 a week." I did. Well, then that was the end of my thinking going to school.
Yeah.
Because right after that, a corporate person came in, and I got to know a little bit about him. I was looking for opportunities anyway, and he would bring people with him. They'd come in to sort of inspect the store and go through. Well, he would always stop at our candy department and buy candy for everybody when the trip home. Mm-hmm. Well, the rules of the May Company were you had to have a pass to get the discount. Well, everybody knew him, so he wouldn't show his pass. So I said got the candy girl one day, I said, "Bohan's gonna be here this week, today or tomorrow." And I said, "He's gonna stop and buy candy from you." And he says, "I don't want you to give him a discount unless he shows you the pass." She says, "I can't ask him for the pass." I said, "I'm telling you, you're gonna ask him for the pass, and I'm gonna be watching. And if you don't ask him for the pass, you won't be selling candy the next day." He comes, goes down there. I'm standing over on the side and see him go. He's leaving. He goes over to candy. He wants this candy, that. And she says, "Mr. Bohan, do you have your pass?" He says, "Well, I'm Mr. Bohan. I don't need a pass." She says, "Well, I was told everybody has to have a pass." So I come up and I said, "Mr. Bohan, is there a problem?" He says, "She won't give me my discount." I said, "Mr. Bohan, I'm sorry, but I go by the rules. The rules of the May Company says everyone has to have a pass. And I didn't see where there was exceptions." And I said, "I'm sorry, I'll make one now." But I said, basically, we run a tight ship by the rules here. Okay, go. I was his assistant 3 months later.
Wow.
And then I became a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was a mentor too. I had good mentors.
That's
I
good.
was with the May Company then for 9 years, and I left them.
Yeah. When you were with the May Company, were you still, this is in Ohio, then in Cleveland area, or where?
Ohio.
Oh. Well, is there anything with your military career that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about your service?
Now, the Marine Corps is tops. And I'm more a Marine than a Navy,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Oh,
Well, thank you for your service and thank
Okay.
you for doing the interview, Jack.
okay.